So, welcome back to our second session of our first day of the Brass 2025, Fall 2025 online symposium. If you're new to the symposium today, I am Nora McKenzie. I'm a member of the Business Reference and Academic Libraries Committee for Brass, and I'm also the co-chair of the symposium subcommittee alongside Kelly LaVoice. Thank you to our entire subcommittee, who includes Christy Cunningham, Kate Cummings, Brian Garrison Wynn, and Doris Dwee. Just so you all know, all of our sessions today are being recorded and they will be sent out to those who have registered along with our slides. If you haven't already, please mute your audio and your video as we get started. For our next session, we'll be having Liz Grauel kicking us off, and I will be the moderator for her session. And her session is entitled Better Together Business Core Curriculum, Library Learning Outcomes, and Brass Competencies in First Year Information Literacy Instruction. And she's joining us today from the University of Dayton. Thank you, Liz, and go ahead.
All right, I am getting myself set up here and making sure I've got my screen share ready. Okay. I don't think my screen share is working
No,
properly, so let me start that again.
okay, sounds
Yeah,
good.
sorry about that. I'm
No
using a
worries.
different computer than usual, and that was not my best planning ever.
That's the nature of the beast sometimes, so no worries.
Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay.
We're still seeing the presenter view. There we go. Perfect.
Okay,
Gorgeous.
perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, so hi everyone. Thank you for your patience while I figure that out. I am excited to be here today to share some of the work I've been doing over the past few years. My presentation is going to focus on the development of library instruction for first year business students at my institution and how I collaborated with teaching faculty and incorporated some of the foundational brass competencies and different information literacy skills along the way. So I think Nora is going to drop a link to these slides in the chat for people who like to follow along that way. And when we get to some of the later sections, you'll be able to click through to some of the resources that I shared, but you'll also be able to get those afterwards as well. Those will be shared. So I will get going. So I'm going to start today by providing some background information about me and my university and Biz 201, which is the first year business class that I work with most extensively. And then from there, I'll shift to talking about the process of updating and redesigning library instruction for this course, and share how I implemented those changes this fall. And then I'll wrap up by discussing the kind of early outcomes and some adjustments that I'm making, leaving time at the end for discussion. I wanted to include the learning outcomes for the session that I listed on my proposal just to kind of help set up um, what I hope you'll be able to take away and maybe be interested in discussing after I present. So those are there for you. So let's get started with some background information. So hi, I'm Liz. I'm the digital pedagogy librarian at University of Dayton, and I'm the library liaison to our School of Business Administration. So I'm a second career librarian, and my background before this was in small business management, and also strategic communication and marketing. And my role here in the library includes instruction, research support, curricular development, and outreach. And I recently served on a working group that co-developed our library's student learning outcomes that are new to us. And most of my focus in practice and in research is on transferable and cross-contextual information literacy, so how it translates beyond the classroom. And I'm coming to you live from the Gem City. University of Dayton is a mid-sized university. It's a private university that's really focused on undergraduate education. And over 25% of our undergraduate students are business majors. So the population I serve is relatively large for our institution. And something notable that I really wanted to share is that information literacy is really a growing institutional priority at UD. So obviously in the libraries, but also like broadly on campus, it is something that is being talked about a lot. It is coming up a lot, and actually using the term information literacy, which is pretty exciting, and helps support a lot of what we're doing. And then today I'll be talking specifically about instruction and curricular support for first year students in our Biz 201 course. So this is a required course and prerequisite for all of our business majors at UD. We average about 10 to 15 sections per semester, and historically we've provided in-person library instruction for those sections, as well as maintained a library guide, which is one of our most heavily used library guides overall. It has been a really heavy lift for our library, but also it's an important opportunity to kind of connect those business students with our resources early in their education. And figuring out how to take this opportunity and make it more manageable has been a really important priority for me. Over the past few years, this course has undergone pretty significant changes, which gave me an on-ramp to work with the course director on mapping curriculum and kind of reimagining how we can support students better as a library. So for most of today, I'm going to use a timeline to show how changes to the curriculum and developments in the library have really influenced the iterations of information literacy instruction for this course, and how it's made room for me to start to investigate and bring in brass competencies into my overall approach to instruction. It feels like I've been doing this for a really long time, but when I laid it out this way, I realized how much work I've packed into just like 2.5 years. So as I'm going through, if it feels like I'm skipping stuff, you're not wrong. And I'm happy to follow up with any questions we don't get to today. Um, and just because this didn't start with me, the pre-Liz era is our starting point. I stepped into a pretty well-established relationship with the people who were, or the instructors and faculty in the biz program. And I had a lot of instructional pieces to really work with. When I first joined, this course was called Introduction to Business. It was run kind of like a mini version of the school's capstone class. Students were given kind of a flavor of all of the business disciplines, and did a lot of hands-on early research through a team project that mimics what they do as seniors in their capstone course. It included company and industry research and analysis, and used quite a few library research tools. Generally, the course instructors expected in class one-shot library instruction that was heavily database demos, usually including some kind of guided exercise developed by the librarian. And I think at one point that exercise actually became a graded course assignment. And when I looked at it, it was kind of a pain to maintain because it would have content that was, or it had to have questions that were really dependent on database content and design. So it was not a very scalable thing. The semester before I started was really heavy. There were almost 20 sections that required instruction. And as a team, we already knew like this was not a sustainable approach. So it was an active conversation and figuring out how to address this program at scale as I took over the role. So that takes me to involving the first year instruction. So fall 2023 was my first full semester working with the School of Business. And my instruction load for the Biz 201 course was actually pretty low, in part because there were actually fewer sections of the course overall. Um, and also because before I started, there had been conversations after that really heavy semester about needing to figure out a different way to provide instruction. So there were some miscommunications or confusions about whether library support was actually available. So some instructors still asked for it, some did not. But also the program itself was changing. The course curriculum was changing and the program leadership was changing as well. And I definitely wanted to maintain our relationship. So I spent a lot of time meeting with the Biz 201 faculty and instructors, and really working with them to understand what students needed from the library, which helped me to get back into most of those classrooms in the spring semester and to start really shifting from database-centric instruction to more research and information literacy instruction. Um, so making the shift from these demos has required a lot of dialogue with my teaching faculty to help them understand what we as a library can offer, which is a reminder that like we know what we do, but it doesn't mean that other people outside of the library know what we're able to do. And I think that's where a lot of the database demo requests come from. And I also wanted to have them help me understand where their students are struggling and what they would like their students to take out of the course in its entirety. And so to do that, I've started developing learning objectives for their sessions that take a more holistic view and give us a shared place to kind of negotiate the content I bring into class. So in this first academic year, we agreed on these three basic objectives that the students just know that the library is there and kind of how to get to it, that they have an introductory understanding of where to find information for their classes, and then that they're able to navigate those information systems. Um, and these outcomes supported some of our library objectives. We want students to know we're here and come use us. Um, they prioritized the SBA goals, and they also used the information literacy framework from ACRL to kind of think about how to build those search skills and those information critique skills. So at the same time, those shifts in curricular strategy and program leadership for the biz classes was going from concept to action. And the course was set to like fully be redesigned and changed in the summer of 2024. So the course itself has a new name. It's Business Cases and Communications. And it even has its own custom textbook, which I think is pretty cool because they couldn't find exactly what they wanted. But it's still a survey of the business disciplines, but instead of having students do kind of a mini research project without having most of the foundational knowledge they need, they're really emphasizing writing and kind of like memo building and presentations and those communication skills. And they started introducing the case method, which is becoming more popular in our business school overall, but really kind of new to us. And those relationships that I had developed during the academic year made it pretty easy for me to plug in with the program director and the instructors. Like they actually, one of the instructors actually approached me and helped to get the ball rolling, which I thought was great. So over the summer, I met with them to learn about the course and identify places where students would benefit from library instruction and resources that supported the instructors as they built out their curriculum. So we recognize that first year students really struggle with knowing what to do with information. They can find it, but they don't, no one has ever really shown them how to understand it or read it. So we decided that those would be some of the skills we would focus on. And library instruction actually became part of the course schedule for all of the sections. And based on what I knew about the course and what we worked on together, I overhauled our library guide and rebuilt our instructional content. Um, I called fall 2024 a pilot period for this approach. And the learning objectives were kind of a mixed bag. Students can locate their course library guide is really direct. And in retrospect, this is kind of like the same vibe as a database demo because it was really task oriented and transactional. Like they can click a thing and find it, which I think is important, but it's not really like an outcome. So there was that. And then those last two objectives are directly related to my conversation with faculty about the reading skills that students lack, and recognizing that business cases were new to them as students and new to the faculty as instructors. They were really focused on that reading and analyzing business case piece. And when I look at these, the only objective that I think is truly rooted in information literacy is that second one. And it's still kind of high level. Um, so that was the one where I really started, as I was developing my instruction, to lean on the brass competencies to think about how to help students get into that mindset. Um, in practice, I put a lot of emphasis this semester on telling students about the learning objectives in learner terms. So being able to say like, hey, if you pay attention today, you should come out of this class knowing how to find the tools and support for the work you're doing in your classes. Um, and overall, the pilot run met those objectives that I had on the last slide, especially with introducing students to business cases and how to engage with them. But I wasn't super satisfied with the direction, and especially the emphasis on that business case skill building seemed kind of outside of the library. It didn't seem super tied to information literacy or research skills, and seemed like maybe it was actually a skill that should have been part of the course curriculum and not the library curriculum. I also realized that students had really never learned where libraries fit into their academic lives. So it was hard for them to see the value of me being there, and that was something I wanted to address. Um, But great news, at the same time as all of this was going on, we were also developing student learning outcomes for the libraries. So that was going to help with that exact problem. And I was on that committee, so I had kind of an inside look at it, and I got to test some of the things we were thinking about. And as our working group was charged with really looking at those, developing those learning outcomes and connecting with the ACRL framework and discipline-based frameworks like the brass competencies, I was able to think about how my instructional programming could better incorporate information literacy components. So this all factored into the next round of instruction in the spring semester, like Pilot 2.0. I pretty significantly updated the session objectives and shared my reasoning with the course faculty who were pretty receptive to it. And instead of being like, here's a library guide for you, I knew that students needed to get that understanding of libraries as academic partners before we could really move forward. Um, I also got more gritty about the business information pieces and scaled back on the business case outcomes. So those middle two session objectives were really tied to thinking about that business information environment, thinking about the information skills they needed, and really structuring some of the session around that. This felt a lot more balanced and based in information literacy goals, especially those that are foundational and transferable. And I had much more intentional connections to the brass competencies and the ACRL framework here, while also still being able to keep some of those SBA objectives there, to balance it out. So this kind of iteration of the instruction wasn't wholly different, but it was shorter and simpler to introduce to students. So it was even the goals as I presented them were more like you're going to learn about the library resources that are available to you. You're going to get a peek at some of the information that might be new to you, and you're going to start learning about how to actually engage with it. You're going to get to ask questions and get help with all of this. And I worked on new ways to explain and engage with students by showing and telling and inviting them in. So giving them an opportunity to share what they already knew or like what their experience was with libraries, and then also telling them how it works here in this environment that they're new to, and being pretty specific about that. Um, Letting them tell me what they expected information to look like, what is content to them, and then also showing them how it lives in this new business context. And this, I really used a lot of the things from the competencies for. Like, there are very specific call outs to content and what it's going to look like. So I was able to lean on that. And then kind of using this to introduce ways of thinking about the purpose and intent of information and who it's for, being able to be pretty critical of it. Using some of the dispositions from the information literacy framework, but making this like interactive activity where we would look at something real and we would talk about what its purpose and audience was and kind of debate back and forth. Um, and then really using the business case piece because I wasn't able to fully lose it, but using that to take all of that together. So, like, what does a library do? How can you think about information? What kinds of content will you encounter in your business life? And then what is the purpose? Who is it for? What are you supposed to do with it? And tying that to business cases, which are a pretty different kind of information. They're not meant to be informative. They're not meant to be applied to um, to decision making. They're meant for learning. So using that to take those pieces and show them how to think about business cases as a type of information in a way that immediately and directly mattered for their education, I thought was important. And it also was really, I think, it really helped me maintain my relationship with those faculty members who were looking for help there. So this wasn't a total revamp of the instruction I developed before, but it really shifted the way I delivered it, and what I wanted to achieve with it. And those information literacy learning outcomes came to the front and helped me to look for better impact in what I was doing. So now we're getting closer to where we are here. That got us through a first year of what was kind of a brand new course, and the library learning outcomes were completed and approved, which was great. Um, and then this kind of immediately and directly influenced the next iteration of instruction for Biz 201, right? So all of those things together went along with what I did next. So I'm not going to go into our library's student learning outcomes in depth because that's a full presentation on its own, and one that I would not be able to give by myself. But thought it was important to show you that we have these five core categories for the outcomes. What you see here is the public facing language for that. So know, decide, practice, share, and ask. And this is how we communicate them as high level objectives to students. And then the little graphic is our slow the snail. SLO, student learning outcomes, and slow. So I think that's fun. But so each of the categories has three levels of proficiency. So this is a screenshot on the screen of how I started mapping the Biz 201 course objectives to our student learning outcomes. So there's three levels of proficiency. Right here you see introductory, but we also have expanded in advanced or advanced and expanded. I can't remember the order. And within those categories, there are these associated knowledge, skills, behaviors, and attitudes. So, what they should be able to know or do at this level of competency. So, yeah, I started mapping these biz course objectives to those relevant student learning outcomes just as a baseline to see how I could think about it. And then a little bit of a bigger project was I mapped the SLOs and the brass competencies. Um, and to make this more manageable, I went through the brass competencies document and I assigned codes to each section of the competencies and then broke down the details into like kind of individual knowledges and practices. And this made it so I could think about um, the competencies kind of holistically, but also look at pieces of it to think about like if I am doing something like this in class, how does this relate to the brass competencies and business research in general? And how can I think about that in the ways I develop activities and content? And this is a way of looking at it, like this I made for myself, but you can see I listed out a student learning outcome for the library and then broke it down into those developmental levels. And then I just made a list for myself of which brass competencies relate to that. And I did this that way as I was going through the courses, I would be able to put it all together. And what is kind of a crosswalk. So here's just another screenshot of my spreadsheet. But you see, I have the course level learning objectives, the library learning objectives, and knowledge, skills, behaviors, and attitudes, and then the brass competencies that go with that. So I was able to look at this all together for Biz 201 this way. And this all gave me a kind of strategic framework that was appropriate for the course, for our library, for our institution, and for the discipline as a whole, to reevaluate my existing instructional content and identify what was in alignment with with those foundations, and then what needed to be revised or completely trashed. There were some things I just tossed out. And I had focused time to really build out the next iteration of this instruction with what I learned from the first year of doing it, with the changes to our university and our library, and to really build this out in a more modular approach. So this meant that as a whole, the instruction was really specific, with reasonable student learning outcomes that were connected to our library SLOs, and that those outcomes directly influenced each of the four modules, which in turn I could break down into more specific and granular pieces. So the first module covers four topics about libraries, and it is connected to one of those three kind of overall instructional learning outcomes with two specific pieces below it. So you're going to learn how to locate resources for your business classes and then understand and learn these things. Like this is what you're going to get out of it. Here's what you'll learn about the library and how it will benefit you to know this. The meatiest module, and one that I think I will put a lot more work into and probably expand into in its own thing in the future, is the business information environment. Um, its learning outcomes come almost directly from our library's SLOs, but the instructional content is very much driven by the brass competencies and how the brass competency document describes sources and producers, and the information environment generally. So that was really, really important here, for developing content. Next, I have a module called Reading in Business Classes, and this is where it's set up to talk about how you look at information and think about it, from different contexts, right? So to connect that business information knowledge, so what is the business information? What is that environment? to direct practice. And then the last one is Intro to Business Cases. So I consider this more of a bonus module, something that is a gesture of good faith, and something that supports the faculty in their classes. It's hard to make that really strong information literacy connection here, but I think it is important to have students see information in different contexts and real recognize that there is that kind of thinking about it that they need to do. So that was a ton of content to deliver to you guys right now, and also a ton to pack into a one shot, especially a 50-minute long one shot. So now I'll talk about how this impacted the modality of delivery. And I'm calling this phase four delivery as a double entendre because while I was doing all this, I was also gestating an entire human being who was scheduled to arrive right at the beginning of instruction season. And I'm a very deadline driven person, and he is just like his mother and made it right then. So I was not going to be there for almost the entire fall, definitely the period when we would be delivering in person instruction for this class. Um, Also, we know that delivering one shots for like 15 sections of one class isn't sustainable to begin with, even if you are not on maternity leave. I definitely could not ask somebody to fill in and do that for me. So it really, we for a long time had wanted to move some of this content to be asynchronous, and it made it so that it was very important to do that. It also meant that I was no longer going to be constrained to that 50 minutes. So that was life changing. I couldn't develop an entire course, but I could figure out how to put a little bit more in, integrate some new assessment formats, and really take advantage of a new kind of mode of delivery. So with all the instructional strategy out of the way, just very happy coincidental timing, I had the small task of actually building the thing. It was not fast. Anyone who's done this knows that. I, in fact, was not super confident I was going to be able to get it over the finish line before I had a baby. Um, but somehow it happened. I almost can't remember doing it anymore. But it happened. So I made myself be very systematic and organized. I started by building a storyboard. So I put a screenshot of that here. This is just a way I think through it. It's a way in my role as a digital pedagogy librarian, I help students um, do their scholarship in modalities they're not used to. So like, let's think about what those key points are, what content you need, and then what the elements are that you're going to use to create that. From there, I knew what kind of visual content and assessment content and audio content I would need. So I built out the visual content. And if you have this deck up, I put a link to the slides, like the Canvas stuff I made for it. I also started building those assessments, which I also put a link to in here. Um, the assessment piece was really, really challenging because trying to have something that's engaging, that you would normally do in class as a group, translating into asynchronous, non-group work was hard. Um, they're not with each other. That part, the assessment part, took a really long time. That was something I had to go back to and kind of figure out, and I'll still be adjusting. Then I wrote my script, and then the shortest piece of all of it was recording and editing. And I dropped in here because people usually want to know how you built something. The tools I used were just what I had on hand. So Canva, I love Canva. I use it all the time. It's really nice because you can animate some things. So I use Canva for the majority of the visuals. I use Camtasia for recording both video and audio, and I also used it for editing. I used the free version to do it on my own computer, and then our university, in our library, we actually have desktop computers that have the pro version of it. So I use that for finishing it. And then I uploaded all these into Kaltura. So that's a product our university has. You can embed like quizzes and assessments into it. So I use that because that's what we have. I wasn't able to share the Kaltura videos with you, so you won't be able to see those like integrated assessments, but I did upload all of the videos to Vimeo. So there's a link if you have the slides open, and it'll also be provided to you if you want to go watch the videos. So the total video runtime ended up being only about an hour. There's 6 individual videos. So there's like a 2-minute introduction, one for each module, and then a 2-minute conclusion. So you can watch all of them in about an hour, but if you do the assessment pieces and the activities, it'll probably take about 2 hours to complete. So then I published those bad boys, drove to the hospital, had a baby, and disappeared until about 4 weeks ago. So my colleague who filled in for me made sure that the instructors had access to it. And I came back and got to start seeing what happened. So yeah, it was really great. The asynchronous modules were available. We made them available in Canvas too. So I actually set up like something in Canvas Commons where if the instructors wanted to, they could just add it to their class and students could access the videos one by one, or they could just go directly to Kaltura to do it. So that was great. Um, the outcome so far, really high adoption. It was the Canvas modules or the Kaltura videos were integrated in every section of Biz 200 and 201. So it's cross-listed as 200, but it's the same class.
5 minutes?
Over, sorry?
5 minutes?
Okay, thank you. Over 250 complete submissions were collected. There were actually over like 400 engagements, just not every student completed the conclusion module, which is okay. It was just a survey, so that's all right. Um, it was really scalable. Some of the content I have is actually appropriate for other courses. The videos themselves can be revisited and reused by students. Um, Obviously, it frees up a lot of time. I'm no longer spending that much time in classes introducing this. Also interesting is that we can kind of get some of this baseline thing, these intro topics out of the way so I could give more targeted instruction as needed. Um, but the big challenge was that I had evidence of some AI use throughout the modules. Nothing I like can definitively say is AI use, but there were enough indicators that the module content was gone through using some kind of program. It just in the types of answers that came in or mistakes that were very bizarre. Um, so it just kind of raised concern about if students are actually learning and the need for maybe some additional information literacy instruction around AI. Because some of the stuff was just straight up like I could tell it was hallucinations. So that was one of the things that I noticed right away. Um, so for spring 26 and beyond, the instructors were really happy with this modality. They are happy that, I was asked, do you want to come in again or would you like us to use this? And I said, let's use it. I brought up my suspicion about AI being used. So we've agreed that we'll integrate an AI checker, and we're going to let students know it's there. So it's not a gotcha. We're just going to let them know up front, like it will flag, we'll know. There's a way to do it so that there'll be a prompt that only AI would be able to detect an answer. So that's how we would know. Um, I will be collaborating with teaching faculty to discuss some AI information literacy curriculum opportunities. So something they could integrate in class if maybe there's a desire to have a workshop. And really continuing that assessment and content adjustments. And since I've started this work, I'm also going to be continuing to map department level learning outcomes to the student learning outcomes and brass competencies, looking for more opportunities to make some of the reusable foundational content and thinking about how I can use these competencies and outcomes to really become more strategic with my upper level in-person instruction. And with that, I will open it up for discussion.
All right, so if you have any questions for Liz, go ahead and put them in the chat. We had just a couple, one comment. So FYI, AI checkers are fairly inaccurate per third-party audits. So just anything y'all are thinking about in regards to that.
Yeah, so that is what I have to learn a little bit more about it, but there are ways to I like I my I when I had realized how many of the responses looked like they were clearly using I was like, why are they using like there were some questions where I was wondering why somebody would take the time to use Chat GPT to answer the question. Like it would be so much more work. And I was like, that's alarming. But my director had told me she recently went to some program where she learned about ways that you can put like Canvas and video content into you can give it your password and it'll go through and answer everything for you. So we suspect that that's actually what happened because it would have been so much work otherwise. But a way they have just to flag it is to put in a prompt that would be caught by generative AI and a response would be created, but it would only it would not like if you were not using generative AI, it wouldn't be flagged that way. So yeah, but yeah, I agree. I think most AI detectors are kind of bogus. So yeah, I'm more interested in making sure like students have the opportunity to think about whether they want to do that or not. I don't think I'm the AI police.
Sure. And I think actually you answered one of these next questions. Did you embed a Trojan horse for the AI tool to see? So yeah, yes, you
Yes, that's what
did.
I once I learn how to do it in the next 3 weeks, I will be figuring that out.
All right, well, we'll look for the report back in the spring.
Yes, I will let you know
All
what
right,
I find.
perfect. Okay, one other question. How are you able to get buy-in for asynchronous modules and course integration?
Yeah, so I mean, part of it was just I am pretty straightforward with what I can and can't do. So if I know that I don't have like I or the libraries don't have the capacity, I will just say, hey, we probably can't support this at scale. Here's what we could do instead. So I just make the offer, like, here's a way we could go about this. For the asynchronous content, it really did help that I was able to say, like, uh, I'm going to be on maternity leave and can't like physically can't come to this. But also sometimes with like especially with the introductory courses, I have another like an accounting class that has like 15 sections that I'm talking to about this. They just don't have room in the course schedule when it is an introductory course with many students to repurpose a session or two for library instruction. So having it available as something that can be done like assigned as homework, I think has been really nice for them. And then also like I'm just really interested in what their courses are doing. So I go in with the assumption that like I wouldn't know what to ask them to do for me if I was having them come in. I wouldn't know what they could provide. So I just assume like they don't know what I can provide either. So I just tell them like, here's some ideas. What do you think? And then we go back and forth.
That's great. All right, we got a couple comments too. Thank you, Liz. This is so helpful to see your process and learning outcomes for everything. Thanks for sharing. And just as a note, I'll be putting in a link to the videos and a lot of the content that Liz discussed as well in the chat in just a moment. Another thank you comment, fantastic presentation. So many great ideas to implement and so well communicated. A compliment and then a question. So awesome, Liz. Very interested in seeing more about your process for coding brass competencies to your SLOs. That could probably take another presentation. Will you be publishing or blogging about that process elsewhere?
Um, I will at the very least figure out how to make my like brass codes available because it was really useful for me and was kind of busy work. So I would if I would have been thrilled if I actually I didn't even really look for it, but I will at least figure out how to make that available. As for mapping to the SLOs, I need to check on like how much of that my library is like willing to put out in the world. I just don't know. But yeah, I would be happy to figure out a way to share, like, here's how I broke it down, because that made it a lot easier.
Perfect. And another compliment, great curriculum mapping technique and implementation, interesting focus on business cases, very good work, personal and professional. Yes, I was applauding your delivery and delivery. Let's see. Some horror around AI use from students. No surprises there. Do, do, do. Oh, and then some context around a question. So, in this person's institution, the emphasis is on how to align our learning outcomes with higher levels of Bloom taxonomy, even for first-year university students. This often means aiming beyond understanding and identifying towards more advanced cognitive processes. So, for example, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. I'm currently reflecting on how to adapt my own objectives to this approach. So, the question. I noticed that many of the learning objectives presented today focus on comprehension level skills such as understanding and identifying key concepts. Have you also considered integrating higher level objectives such as applying, analyzing, evaluating, or even creating, even for first year students? And it's in the chat
Yeah.
too, since it's kind of a
Yeah, I
long
was just
question.
reading along. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. Something I am kind of trying to wrap my head around is how to do some of that in an asynchronous format. Um, I think like the analyzing and evaluating, and there are pieces of like the assessment and the activities, the analyzing and evaluating are there. So to not to get like too meta, but like the outcomes of some of the assessments and the activities that are built in are really that like seeing how they can analyze and evaluate. Um, and yes, so yes, and I a lot of what I just like kind of snippeted today is from those introductory level um SLOs that we have in the library, but the expanded and advanced levels do really go into the higher levels of the Bloom's taxonomy. So, um, and I don't expect it to be linear, right? I think that there are plenty of things that a first year student can do at an advanced level, and I think there are plenty of things that even a graduate student is still at an introductory level. So, yes.
Thank you. Let's see. Oh, just one comment on someone else who's done some asynchronous work. There's always the temptation to put too much content into it. And Kirsty has to take stuff out every single year. So
Yeah.
just some,
Uh, Yeah, there could definitely be like as I was doing this, I was like, this is an entire tutorial on its own. So yes, I will definitely be editing down as time goes on.
very fair. I have please put any other questions in the chat. We have about 4 more minutes, but I had a question too, because I've done some asynchronous creation, content creation too. And I was curious because I think if I'm remembering correctly from your presentation, you said like 250 students went through the process. Were you in charge of all the grading or did the professors take that on? Were
Yeah,
those grades incorporated into their actual like course grades or just curious about some of the logistics?
no, that's a good question. So, since I was using Kaltura, it collects all the responses automatically. So for anything that was multiple choice, I could see the grades. For everything else, I would have to output it and like look through it, which I was doing for my own assessment. But the faculty do want to see the output. So one of the like kind of limitations of that platform is I have to download the content as a CSV and provide it to them. And that is something like that was one of their first questions, like, how can we see this next semester? So I'll be adding like a flag at the beginning where they say what section they're in so I can just download and send the CSVs with the responses to the faculty. I I try to ask that library like anything like this is not used for a letter grade in courses. So I'm like if you're using it as completion, okay, but like so I do a lot of review of it for my own knowledge, but I don't like especially for short answer and open responses, I wouldn't provide like an answer key for grading.
Very fair. And then someone asks, how much time did it take the video tutorial, or how much time did the video tutorial take you an estimate from your concept all the way to your delivery?
3 years, but really, yeah, from like the concept, so from knowing I needed to do it to getting it done, I started really focusing on it in the beginning of May, and it was basically the only thing I did until the middle of July. So about 2 months. I mean, granted, I was also like super pregnant, which kind of slowed me down. But yeah, I think with the background work I had like I had kind of a leg up because I was testing out some of the learning outcomes work on it. But I would say probably like 2.5 months, um, having already had some of the stuff that I could kind of re-edit and use again.
Thank you. And I just put, Liz very graciously provided some links to the tutorial videos, the visual content, and the assessment. So I've put all of those in the chat if you'd like to refer to any of those. And we have just about 1 minute left before we're wrapping up. Any last questions? All right. Seeing none, if Kelly or Dorsey would like to